And let's go. So once again, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining another session of Azure Power Lunch, and happy Friday. Once again, quick disclaimer: this call will be recorded, and we will place our recording on our YouTube channel. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can drop off now. So first of all, topic of discussion today is how we can build Azure function using any language, using something called a feature in Azure function called Azure Function Handler. So that's what we're going to talk about. Quick agenda. We're going to look at how Azure functions work for quick level set, as we always do when we start with the topic. Then we're going to talk about custom handler, and most of the time will be spent on demos. We go through hopefully a couple of demos to show how these Azure Function custom handler work. So first of all, what is the behavior? I mean, how Azure Function actually works? You have an Azure Function host process, and the behavior is slightly different if you are using a scripting language like Node.js or Python. In that case, whatever your code is, that is called by the host. When a trigger such as HTTP request or a timer trigger, one of those triggers fires, that's when it start executing that particular script, basically calling your function logic. So that's what happens. On the other hand, if we are talking about things like compiled languages like C Sharp and Java. In that case, you have those DLLs or jar files, and the host function, the host process basically goes in and execute, um, call the methods in those DLLs and jar files. Okay, so that's how compiled languages work. So a number of scenarios, we have certain languages where there is no support for Azure functions. That's where custom handler comes into play. So basically, here is the core principle. As long as a language supports HTTP primitives like get, post, these it can understand that, can work with that, you can create a web server, and basically that's your custom handler. And Azure Function will be able to talk to that web server um, over HTTP, and that's how kind of in that case they serve as a proxy, and that's how they will be able to communicate with that particular um, language function. So, for example, if you are creating an Azure function, there is no support for Go or Rust or R. That's where these custom handler comes into picture. You can create a custom handler. Basically, custom handler is nothing, just a web server, and that's it. You can configure your Azure function, and then you should be able to call um, you can call that custom handler from your Azure function. That's how you can write uh, functions in a language that is not directly supported. So this is kind of a way through a proxy. Just some of the things to keep in mind, and we will take a look at them a bit later in the session. So first of all, I want to show you. By the way, any questions so far? Okay, so I have a simple Go app. Okay, and will have a link to the demo itself. For that, you will need to install Golang. So what I have on this machine now is I have installed Golang. Of course, I have function runtime, and I'm running VS Code. Okay, so let me just show you. Let me just increase the size a little bit. screen. So I have this simple Go library. It has 5 kind of APIs, and you don't have to don't go too much into the semantics of Go language. The, and I'm new to this, so I won't be able to address in-depth question about the language. This is just a HTTP function, HTTP in, HTTP out. So that's what it is doing. Um, the first one, you pass a query string and it will say hello world to that. Or you can, that's how this function works. Then you have the other function, which are just a simple calculator. It add, subtract things. And in the end, this is your router. This is where you are tying these functions to this web server. So you're saying that if this is the route, then call this handler. Okay, and there are other ways to do it as well. I'm just going with a very simple approach. Okay, so the thing is, Go is a compile. I mean, a language that you have to compile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call Go build, and as you can see here, and I'm going to build this executable. Okay, so this is just building the executable. Any
I can't
questions?
see the screen, Naveed. I don't know if it's just me.
Oh, anybody else having the issue?
I see it.
Yeah, even I see it.
Do you mind like kind of rejoining?
Yep, I'll do that.
Maybe
Thanks.
yeah, sometimes these I mean, electronic as technology, when it works, it's the best. When it does not, it's the worst. So, okay. So basically, this is what it is. I just compiled it, and I'm going to run this executable. And you can see there's a simple calc.exe that gets created, and I'm going to run this executable, and let's see what happens. So I am just going to run it. It's listening at this port. I'm going to copy this link and I'm going to go in here and paste it. And let's remove the HTTPS so we don't have any. And um, just call this. Of course, the page not found. What are some of the routes that you see there? There is an API / hello world. So let's call that route. Okay. And I'm just gonna do that. And it's saying that it needs a query string response. So we're just gonna call it name is equal to APL, and it's gonna call hello Azure Powerland. So that's how it's working. And I'm just printing, okay, what verb was called, things like that. You can post it or you can do get. Long story short, this is our um, um, simple Golang web server that is working. Once again, as I said, just try to understand the concept. Don't worry about the language because these are HTTP primitives. I mean, any language that supports REST or basically HTTP primitives, you should be able to write it. So language is not important there. Any questions at this point? Okay, no worries. So what we're gonna do, we are going to start a new project. I'm going to create an Azure function and
Hey, Naveed, I'm sorry, real quick question. I was muted when you asked before. Does this mean that, I mean, you're deploying a language that is not natively supported with Azure Functions in this Go language. If a customer were to do this, would that affect their ability for support? Is this a demonstration of something that would work, but does it give clients a supported architecture from Microsoft support standpoint?
That's a good question. So basically, I mean, you have to realize that the support will be limited to, okay, the call is going to the function or the handler.
Okay.
Okay. Once that it's inside the handler and there is something wrong there, that's where the responsibility of the customer comes in. Okay.
Okay.
So that's just keep that in mind. Other than that, should be okay because you're just creating a function. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So let's create a new function project. Let this thing finish up and then we will create a new function project. So I'm going to create a new function project, and I'm going to use this folder demos, and I'm going to create a new folder. Okay, so I'm just going to use that. Come on. This here. So let's do that. And it's going to ask us, okay, look, these are choices, JavaScript, Python, blah, blah, blah. We're going to just use custom handler. That's it. Okay. And it's going to ask us, what is your trigger? We're going to call it HTTP trigger. And I'm going to call it hello world. Okay. So that's our trigger. And I'm going to say open in a current window. All good. The function is there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a Go file here. Okay. And I'm just going to name it Go demo.go. Go is the extension. So with that, and by the way, just keep in mind it has to be in the same folder as your host.json. Okay. That's very important. So that's why it's in that folder. There is nothing there. And I'm going to do just some cut paste. So I'm just going to copy this stuff. We'll see, and paste it here. So, okay. So far, nothing radical, all vanilla stuff. I'm going to add one more thing here. You see this listener address? We need this listener, whatever the custom handler, to listen on an address provided by Azure Function. So in order to do that, I'm gonna do a bit of cheating and copy this piece of code from here. So what it does is it basically looks at an environment variable. If that is available, it will use that instead of the fixed 8080 address. Okay. So let's save this. And the last thing is, if we go to host.json, it's using custom handler. We have to define what is the name of the custom handler. Okay, that's very important because if we don't define it, how does it know what custom handler it has to use? This is the executable path. Okay, so first of all, let's build this executable. So I'm just going to do go build, build, and the name of our this is go func demo. So it's gonna build it, and you will see an executable appear over here. Okay, this is our so let me just rename it. Just copy the name and go in here and paste it. .exe. Okay, so that's set. One last thing, and I will explain it in a second. This is the last change we have to make, and that is this. Okay, what that is doing, this is kind of saying you need to forward request directly to the custom handler. So it will start sending requests directly to the custom handler and to improve performance. But this will only work for HTTP triggers. And we will look at it once we do the queue trigger. How does it work? Okay, long story short, this is done, and it's all ready to go. So here is once again, look at our Go demo. This is Hello World. This name, you see Hello World, it has to match exactly with this. Okay. Case should be the same as well. That's what I figured out. Second thing is, always, whenever you make changes to your Go script, always compile it. I was pulling my hair out when I was kind of playing with this stuff, realized I did not compile, build this thing. So just a few things to keep in mind. I'm just going to do a func start. So let's start the function and let me just expand it a little bit to show you what's going on, allow access. And by the way, you see there is one function and it caught up to it. And look, internal handler is listening to that. Okay. And at that time, you don't have to run the internal handler. Function host will run that handler. All of it is responsible for it. You are not doing anything. You're just saying, okay, this is my handler. Go function host, run it, and it will scale out if more requests are coming in. So all of it is its responsibility. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna click on it, and it's here. It's saying pass a name. Once again, we are going to pass a name called name is equal to APL. Nice. Something, not sure what the call was coming in. Okay, so now this is all HTTP trigger. Let's add now a non-HTTP trigger. So what we're gonna do now is how we can add a, let's say, a queue trigger. So before I do that, I just want to show you, I have a storage account created. This is my storage account, and this is a queue in that called APL data. Okay, that's already created, and I don't have to do anything with that. So I'm gonna create a storage queue trigger. Okay, before I move any further, any questions on that? So let's create a new function. It's going to ask us, okay, we need an Azure Queue Storage trigger. We call it a trigger. Okay, that's the trigger name. It's going to ask us what is the new web app setting. We're going to say just use Azure Web Job Storage. And what was the name of our queue? It's APL data. Okay. So we're just going to use APL data. That's the name of the queue from which it will derive. So it has created the setting. If you come in here, the only thing it has done, it has created another folder with function.json, and this is all that information. Okay, that's all there is to it. Nothing more, nothing less. Now we have to do a little bit of wiring or kind of making connection. So first, if you look in this, there are all HTTP function, but there is no function. We haven't created one to address this queue trigger. So once again, I'm going to do a little bit of cheating. And by the way, I will provide a link to this code. So if you want to take a look at it, you can, the link to the GitHub. So this is my function code. This is the code in the handler that will respond to um, the request for a queue trigger. Okay, so that's that code. And as you can see, there are some structure. And by the way, just keep in mind, it's all structures. We are not dealing directly with queue because queue trigger is received by the function host, and then it is calling the this is going to call this handler to do all that magic. Okay, that's all there is to it. So there is no queue semantics there. It's just parsing and JSON marshalling and unmarshalling. That's coding and uncoding. Okay, that's all there is to it. I'm gonna create a handler func here, and I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna call it queue trigger. Okay, and it will be calling this function queue trigger handler. Hope everybody is with me so far. So this is that. But just keep in mind, very important, we have to go in here and update this Azure function storage setting. Okay, So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to copy the keys. And yeah, uh, anyways, I'm deleting this storage account after this demo. So if you want to copy that, feel free. I'm going to go in here and paste it. So this is the storage account. It's that configured. So all things are hopefully now tied up. One thing we have to do is, as I said, since we have modified the Golang, we will have to build this. Okay, so we are building this. And at that point, okay, so it's built up, everything is ready. So let's start our function app again. Let's see what it says here. Once again, it is starting the listener, the internal custom handler, I'm sorry, at this address. This is the function itself. And what we're going to do is to run this, we have a Azure Storage Explorer. I'm pretty sure everybody is aware of Azure Storage Explorer. This is a on-prem tool that allows you to, I'm not sure why this is doing this. Okay, so let me add a new message and I'm going to call it 01. So once I send this message, let's go back to our function. It will take a second. Okay, why the function trigger is not firing? Let's go back here. Oh, I know. I have two functions which are listening to it, and I think one of that function has picked it up. So here's what I'm gonna do, folks. I'm gonna create another queue. I'm gonna call it APL data2. So I have another function. When I was kind of practicing the demo, I created that function. So let me go in here and I'm gonna stop this. Okay, I'm going to stop the function. I'm going to go into the queue trigger. I'm going to say APL data2. So now it's listening to APL data2. It's not listening to the same address. I'm going to start the function one more time, same thing. And let's do this again. Now I'm sending a message to APL test 3. So let's send the message here. Message is sent. Let's come back to our look, this is the message received. So just think of it what we have done. We have created a queue trigger and tie it to the custom handler. Custom handler is still speaking HTTP. It has no idea about the whole queue semantics. Yes, it is just doing some marshalling and unmarshalling or decoding and marshalling of the JSON object in Go language. That's all it is doing. And we are able to respond back to the trigger. Okay. Any question? We have 5 more minutes. I need to cover a few more things. So, okay.
Is it similar? I mean, the code fragment that you showed makes me think I could be totally wrong. Looks like similar to durable functions where you wrap several calls together.
No, it is not durable.
It's
It
not.
is basically
No,
what we
I
have.
didn't mean it's durable, but it looks similar to that. So
Yeah, I mean, it's still an Azure function. Basically,
okay.
we're just like compartmentalizing thing. This is the custom handler, the web server, which is processing the actual function logic. And this is function host is responding to trigger and then just calling this a web server. Okay.
Okay.
One thing is now what you can do is same way you can push this function to Azure. Since we have 4 minutes now, I just want to show you, I have already pushed a function in Azure since it's there. All of its configuration, nothing is different. It's just using, if we go to the configuration, it will, once it's come up, function runtime setting. But you see here, stack is custom handler. Okay, so that's how it shows up here. And if we, in the same way, we can run this function here. I mean, for example, if I go into, let's say, add numbers, I can code and test. I can say, give it a second once it's come up, test and run, and query parameter. We can do val1 200 and add another parameter. And let's run this function. And as you can see, this is the result, 200, 300 result pass. Okay, so this is how it is working. And by the way, there's another way you can deploy a function. You can deploy a container. So basically, once you can do is you can deploy a function in a container, and then just like you have an app service that where you deploy a container, when you deploy a function in a container, it will start delegating. I mean, that container will now start responding to your requests. Okay, so there's a sample which I have a link in the documentation. Sorry for the time, I could not go over it, but that talks about R language on how you can deploy with R. And let me I just want to go back to the presentation and I just want to make sure people are aware of this. One thing is function host is not a reverse proxy, okay? And you have to be aware when you are doing. If you are doing a language that Azure has support for, like Python, Node.js, Java, please use uh, the standard method, which is not using custom handler and the built-in support. If you are using a language where there is no support, yes, then this is the way to go. But just keep in mind, there are certain things like HTTP2, WebSockets, and response streaming. Those features are not available, okay? And your cold start time may be higher, okay? Because now we have two things, function host as well as this custom handler that we have to start. And by the way, you don't have to start it. Function host will start that handler and move on, but that's just something to keep that in mind. Okay, I think we are right on time. Any questions?
It's probably not a very good question, Naveed, but I mean, in theory, you could write a C# function that used a custom handler and execute that. I mean, I know why you wouldn't want to because you wouldn't have all these other features, but it seems from the paradigm that that would work, right? Like
That's
it
right.
really
Yeah,
could be any language that could
absolutely.
be executed.
Any
right?
language
Okay.
that supports the HTTP primitives should work. Yeah, absolutely. You
I
can.
mean, I know you wouldn't because you lose all the features that you have here, but
That's
clients
totally
like
right.
to do all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why we have to help our customer. If you're a customer self, we have to make sure that, we don't over engineer this thing. This is to address certain specific scenarios. Okay. Only keep it to those scenarios. Anything else, folks? Okay. Thank you very much for joining another session of Azure Power Lunch and hope to see everybody next week. Happy Friday, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy.